whole idea behind this webinar was, one, was we're always trying to help our customers any way we can. And what this was brought about by was just a lot of audits and field training things we've been doing lately, and saw things that, you know, might make a good webinar just as a good refresher of things to look for. That you spend lots and lots of money on a truck, you know, maybe $100,000 on a truck, you know, 30, 40, 50, you know, $80,000 for a trailer, reefer, liftgate. All it takes is one little thing to bring that whole operation to a standstill. So we just thought, hey, this would be a good time to go through and kind of do a preventive maintenance inspection just to make sure everything's working like it should. So we're going to kind of go through it step by step. And the biggest thing I want to remind everybody today we're just going to talk about inspection type things, not actually troubleshooting. If you notice in the information today, there is already a sign up for the next 2 months. Next month we'll be doing direct troubleshooting, and the month after that we'll be doing select troubleshooting. So we can go ahead and get you signed up for those if you'd like today. But again, this is just inspection and preventive maintenance. That the key to trouble-free service is to do inspection, whether it's, you know, just on a time interval inside your shop, or one of the biggest things I always tell people is if that trailer's been worked on, you know, the charging system by an outside road service company, is next time it's in the shop, give it, you know, 10, 15 minutes of a good, you know, once over to make sure you don't have, you know, something sitting there that's going to cause you problems down the road. It's a lot easier and a lot cheaper to fix it in-house than it is at, you know, road service. And we're going to start with the nose box. That, you know, we'll start at the front of the trailer and work our way back. And today we're going to, you know, talk a lot about the direct and select, but even if you're just using traditional cables, a lot of these things still apply. Is you have to look at and make sure it all, you know, is working right and is going to be ready to go when it leaves the yard. But first off, we have a direct system. Now, when we say direct, that means it has one input source. And this could be the same thing as if you just had traditional dual pole cables. But when we walk up to that trailer, is that light on the right, which is labeled liftgate light or liftgate battery, that is telling you what the open circuit voltage of those batteries, you know, should be. If it is blinking green, it says those liftgate batteries ought to be at least 12.4 volts. If it's blinking amber, those batteries are less than 12.4 volts. So it gives you an immediate, you know, status of, you know, where those batteries are when you first walk up to the trailer. If you have no lights, say, hey, you got a, you know, a real problem with this trailer, and again, now you got to go into troubleshooting. But our whole idea on this is, you know, hey, take a look at it. Is that light blinking green, so you know those batteries are in a good state of charge before it leaves? Same scenario with a select box. Now, this one, when we say select, says it has multiple input sources for charging. And on this one, you can see the two lights are on solid, so you know that unit is actually charging and those batteries are getting charged. And on this instance, since it's the top light in the center, you know it is charging off the reefer. Obviously, the reefer must be running, and it is charging. But while you're there, you know, take a hold of that box, you know, wiggle it. Is it securely mounted to that trailer? And not just the select box itself or the direct box itself, but look if it's a system that also uses a dual pole. Is it tied into the 7-way? Is it going up to the reefer? Well, you want to look at all of those things and see, is it properly tightened? You know, are the cables secured to the front of the trailer? Is there any damage? You know, whether, you know, someone dropped the trailer or backed into it. Is, you know, everything securely mounted and ready to be used? Now, you may also want to go into the box itself. I'll show you the select unit here, because this is one we actually pulled up on the complaint that it wasn't working. Someone had been in here and rewired it. But we want to look through too is you have the 4 mounting bolts here. Are they tightened properly? Because this top left one, that is also a chassis ground. So we want to make sure that that is properly tightened, especially because that's a ground for the entire system. And kind of out of sequence and everything we're talking about, but on this one, the reason why it wasn't charging properly is somebody had worked on it and moved the orange wire, it should be down here, the bottom right stud, and moved it up to another post, and quote unquote, they made the system work, it did not work anywhere near like it was supposed to, and really surprised that it didn't have a thermal incident because of the way they had it wired here and in the battery box. So again, the one they really didn't think had an issue, but it definitely did, and by doing what we're talking about today, we're able to avoid a road call. Same thing in the other nose boxes. This one was a system that has a combination single and dual pole, but we want to open it up. Make sure everything's tight. Were they, the right connectors used, the right heat shrink used? Is everything tight on the back of those single and dual poles? That doesn't matter where the issue is. We want to make sure we find it and prevent it becoming a road service. And that's one of those things when we talk about the Select, it does have multiple inputs. So we want to make sure we look at all of them and make sure all those different sources are providing the right power for it to be able to perform properly. Next is cables and harnesses, and Thomas is going to take over from here.
All right, thanks, Larry. Good afternoon, everybody. Cables and harnesses, I always see these as the central nervous system to the entire trailer. One of the most common things that you'll see just going down the road that doesn't really have anything to do with lift gates, but is flickering lights. That can be due to a lot of bad things that can affect the lift gate, though. Could be a bad ABS cord, could be a bad 7-way socket, could be repaired harness that with tons of butt connectors or terminals that have gotten corroded or left open-ended. And I'll tell you, if the harness is having trouble keeping the lights on, there's probably a good chance it's going to have trouble charging your liftgate batteries. This slide shows a good example of how to secure the harnesses and cables. You really do want to use cushioned clamps, when you're running them through the cross members or parallel to the cross members. We see these where the cushion is fallen out, and that'll chafe the jacketing on these, and eventually, with all the bumping and vibration going down the road, it will eventually expose that copper, which then leads to corrosion or shorts in the system. When you're running through the cross members, definitely make sure you use a rubber grommet. Again, those cross members, when they drill those holes, they're not smooth. They don't file them down. They are rough, and again, they'll chafe the jacket and expose the wire, once again causing corrosion to get into the system, or shorts. This is something I'm sure everybody sees, and these repairs are commonly made, out in the field, and a lot of times they're unavoidable. You got to get the trailer back to the shop, but these type of connections, while good, are not great. If you have to make a connection like this, use a bare union, and then solder it and use the proper heat shrink. But every one of these connections is a point of voltage drop. It's an interruption in the flow of electricity, and every time that it has to go through that, it's going to lower the voltage. So if you're trying to charge batteries and you've got a whole bunch of repairs from damage on the harness going back there, it's going to be hard to charge those batteries properly, which will end up causing issues with down lift gates, or problems associated with corrosion, which again, voltage drop. And Larry, you take back the plate assembly.
All righty. Next thing is, again, we're just working from the nose of the trailer back. The next part would be that plate assembly in the battery box. I want to take a look at it. That we've tried very hard to, make this as few terminations as possible for the installer. And when we ship it out, if you'll notice here, we use color-coded heat shrink. We send out solid copper tin-plated terminals. So it's a pretty good way to check that, has this been worked on before? Has, road service, someone gotten here and done a repair? We see a lot of times where our ends are not used. They'll use some generic crimp on ends. A lot of times they don't provide the best connection, and definitely are not a very sealed connection. That, when we're talking about these battery boxes, they are prone to getting all kinds of road splash. A lot of times you're near batteries, so you can be getting, some acid spray or some acid from venting of the batteries. So you want to take a look at this. The other thing, too, is the four-way Deutsch plug going into the converter. Is take a good look at it. That's a lot of times people will inspect these or someone's worked on it. They don't always get them pushed all the way back in. That can cause all kinds of, poor connection issues, can cause a lot of excessive heat. So if you see that connector there that's, shine or signs of heat damage, it's a good time to replace it now. It's not going to get any better with time. Again, just look over those entire, lengths. Is there any damage where someone's, stabbed with a test light? That's part of the reason we use these terminals and junction posts like that, so nobody needs to. But the orange wire, for example, that is what powers up the unit up front. So if that wire is damaged, the unit can't even come on to charge the system or to monitor the system. The yellow wire is what turns that converter off and on. So again, any damage on any of these is you can have a simple bad repair or, miscrimp, something left loose. All those will cause that system to not work at all. So we want to make sure we look at that entire system. The next thing we're going to look at is battery hold down. So I'm going to turn it back over to Thomas.
All right. Battery hold downs are simply a device for holding down the batteries. They keep them stationary and secure. Going down the road, some states are better than others with repairing their potholes, but everybody's got them. They're bouncing all over the place. That vibration can affect the terminals on there. It can loosen the bolts, and you'll start seeing sparking or shorts. You can look in this picture shown, and there's a piece of metal laying on top of those batteries. That's I'm sure everybody has seen them. They are provided in every liftgate, but right now it's nothing more than a piece of metal laying on top of those batteries. That starts going down or the trailer's going down the road, and that starts bouncing if it touched that post. And then anything metal, it touched the post on the positive side, and then anything metal, it's going to spark. And that's a picture of this last one. It's on the previous trailer. We took that off of the previous slide. You can see that will cause or could cause a thermal event. And a lot of the reasons why we see those battery tie downs that aren't or not battery hold downs that aren't installed properly is it's the last task on buttoning up the battery box, and they've got 3 more trailers they need to get to, and maybe they've been replacing batteries pretty frequently because they haven't been charged, and you have road calls for dead batteries. So I'm not going to put that hold down in because I'm just going to change them out pretty soon. Well, that adds to a whole nother conversation about your liftgate charging system, but we need to put these hold downs on there to keep the batteries secure and safe. Yeah, the one of the things I always hear Larry say, that if someone didn't have time to do it right initially, then subsequent times, the 3 or 4 times after that, it's I mean, why are you spending that time to do it? You got to get it right the first time, and this is a simple procedure that will keep those batteries safe and secure. This is just another picture. I mean, it's something easy to install. Put it in there, secure those batteries, keep anything from jostling around and causing a possible thermal incident. Battery inspections. Back to you, Larry.
All righty. And the thing is, too, is, don't forget the obvious. When you open up that battery box, and, same thing we've, preached for years about trucks, is, take a look at that entire, battery pack. There's a lot of things you can see, immediately. One of the things is, take a look at the age of those batteries. That's pretty much all battery manufacturers use these little stickers. And they'll either be all numeric like, we see here, or they may be an alphanumeric type sticker. Difference is the first part for the month, it may be an A, B, C, type deal. And January is A, February is B, and it goes all the way through M. M is actually the 13th letter, but they skip I because it looks too much like a 1. But if you look at these batteries here, so hey, this one was 11 of 2017, so November. The other one, 419 or April of 2019. So you can very easily tell how old these batteries are. And batteries are one of the two things, it's either, kind of a feast or famine. Either we get complaints of people say, well, I only get 6 months out of batteries. That's normal for a liftgate. And say, no, you ought to be getting a lot more than 6 months out of liftgate batteries. And we had a customer, call us one time and said, the system's not working. Then went out and took a look at it, and it seemed to be charging fine. So, well, what's the, complaint? He says, well, the driver complains that the gate goes dead after, 2 lifts. And it's like, well, how about we check these batteries? And sure enough, when we did a load test on the batteries, both of the batteries in that gate were just totally worn out. They had no capacity left. System was working fine. The batteries were 100% charged, but they'd been in there so long. These were like 6-year-old batteries. They just had no capacity left. So still got to take a look at those. And I recommend whenever you do preventive maintenance, you do load test on these batteries. That goes back to some of the previous webinars we did before. One was, battery load testing, proper testing of a battery. But yeah, take a look at the age of them. If you recently put batteries in this thing, say, hey, we need to take a look at it. There's something else wrong. Just putting more batteries is not going to fix it. But at the same time, too, says, ooh, these batteries are 4 years old. Do we want to go ahead and spend the money, get them out now before they do cause us a problem? Again, batteries are a lot cheaper in your shop than it is, getting them replaced on the road. But I'll go back to the comment before is, if you've recently put batteries in this thing, you need to stop and take a look. Why is this thing not working? Is there, something wrong with the system? Has somebody hooked it up wrong? Again, road service got in there and helped us all. Or maybe just need to take a look, say, is it the right system for the application? So don't ever hesitate to reach out to us to help on any of these things. Is the age of the batteries can be one of your biggest indicator of how well everything's working. But simply throwing new batteries in it every time is not the answer. Another one, just a quick look at the batteries. Open up the battery box, and what do you see? You got 3 different makes and models of batteries in this thing. You got 2 AGM and then 2 different manufacturer, different spec flooded cell batteries. What a recipe for disaster. You should never mix and match chemical composition as far as like AGM and flooded cell. They are different batteries. The system will charge either one of them, but you should never mix them. And again, it doesn't matter if it's a truck or a trailer or whatever, you should never mix chemistries. But again, too, is the flooded cells are totally different ratings of batteries. That our rule of thumb is you should always keep batteries within 50 CCAs of each other and within 6 months age of one another. What happens here, if you start just replacing a battery, you get the pup from every dog in that battery box. That's you're destined for road calls because you've got all these different age of batteries that one's going to fail. Then another one's going to fail. So we do recommend, recharge programs. There's nothing wrong with a recharge battery if it goes through the right procedures, but those batteries should all come out together. They should all be tested, recharged, and if you have a good match set to go back in, then use those recharge batteries. If you don't have a good match set, now you are forced to use new batteries, but make sure you give it a fair test and a fair life by going through all those right steps. So with this one, obviously those should be replaced with good recharge or new ones. But if you do replace those batteries, is the other thing that we see a lot of is brand new batteries that are covered with corrosion. That's, these batteries are going to give off gassing. They are going to pick up road splash, road salt, all the different, nasty things they put on the highways for, ice prevention. You have to be very careful with these and make sure everything is clean. You get a question a lot of times is, well, what do you recommend for a spray? It's like, I really don't care what you use. There's lots of good sprays out there. I've got some customers that just use spray paint. Spray paint. The only thing we're trying to do is protect the bare metal. We want to, once we clean or load test the batteries, we want to make sure everything's clean and tight, and then apply grease, paint, dielectric grease, whatever you use in your shop. We're just trying to make sure we protect that bare metal from corrosion. But again, you can have the best batteries in the world, the best gate in the world, the best charging system in the world. If you've got bad connections and corroded connections, none of it's going to work properly.
Larry, if I could say something about that last picture as well.
Yes.
You see right there, this is, while corroded, it is seated properly. You always want to have the largest terminal on the bottom and stack them largest to smallest, because you want the greatest amount of surface space to conduct that electricity. But we see this commonly when you open up a battery box and the smallest ones on the bottom, and then the largest ones somewhere in the middle, and then another small one on top. Stack them from the bottom, largest to smallest.
Yes, very valid point. Thank you, Thomas. That is very important to always keep in mind. And make sure you spread them out. That see some of these where they'll have 4 cables on one battery and the other ones only have 1 on it. Don't try to have so many on one post. Move things around. Spread those out so you get as good a connection as you can across all of them. One other thing too is when you are doing your battery connections, you should always be as opposite as possible on them. That says if you have 2 batteries, you're going to have positive on one battery, you're going to have negative on the other battery. So you're trying to charge across those battery packs. Same thing too is whatever your load is. Whether you're on a truck, you're talking about the big cables going to the starter, or of a liftgate where you got cables going to the pump motor, is you should always put them on opposite batteries. You're going to get much better, charging across that entire pack, and you're going to get a more even discharge across the pack by doing that. So it's not just, hey, here's a positive, throw a cable on it. For optimal performance, you do want to do all those things. Next thing we're talking about is circuit protection. That doesn't matter. Again, we're talking about the liftgate charging system, the liftgate pump motor, traditional dual pole cables. Is we got to make sure that those circuits are all protected. Here's a good example trailer we were looking at just the other day. That if you see on that sidewall of the battery box is the circuit breaker for the liftgate pump motor. Apparently that lug had broken off. Someone put a new lug on it and moved it directly to the battery. Well, yes, the gate works now, but guess what? That pump motor is not protected at all. You can very easily have a thermal event in this type scenario. So you need to make sure you put the right eyelet on it, put it back on the circuit breaker like it's supposed to be. And if that circuit breaker is damaged, replace it. But if not, you are not protecting that pump motor at all. And talk about a good place for a thermal event when you have an electrical fire, mixed with a reservoir full of hydraulic fluid, that can go up very quickly. So you want to make sure that breaker is being utilized. Here's another one with that same type breaker. We were out checking the charging system on. A guy made a complaint that something's it's got bad batteries or something. It keeps kicking off, and it's like, well, that really doesn't have anything to do with the charging system. But let's take a look at it. And keep in mind, on a circuit breaker, that is all done by heat versus just current. That because of excessive current is going to generate more heat, and that's what a breaker relies on to trip. This one, it was tripping because these two studs had loose nuts on them. So it was creating a lot of extra heat because of that resistance across it was going into that circuit breaker and causing it to trip. We went back through, just like Thomas mentioned earlier, checked the stack up, make sure everything was on there in the right order, big cables first, smaller wires or cables on afterwards, tightened everything up, and that problem went away. But it was amazing, they equated it to a faulty charging system or faulty batteries is why it was tripping. It's like, no, the batteries are staying up. It's got to be a problem of power between the batteries and the pump motor. And just like anything, a lot of people have listened to our training before on the truck side, is you can have the best batteries in the world and the best liftgate in the world. If you don't have good cables connections connect them, how good does any of it work? Next, we're going to show is the circuit breaker we use for the liftgate charging system. And again, one of the units we were looking at, just checking the charging system, but notice that the little arm was gone. The system still works, but if it were to trip, there's no way to reset that system. So you're looking at a future road call, it's going to happen because at some point that breaker is going to trip. There's no way to reset it, so that's going to have somebody either bypassing that circuit breaker, which is again a recipe for disaster, or if they don't do it by simply unbolting it and moving the two wires, they're going to cut that harness and butt it together. So now we got a bad repair with no circuit breaker. So it's one of those things that that extra 5 minutes today can save you hours and maybe $1,000 in road call by addressing this now. Here's that same battery box I was talking about before, where the liftgate circuit breaker was bypassed. Well, our breaker for the charging system, somebody just left laying in the battery box. That is all bare aluminum and very easy for it to get over there and touch the positive on the battery over to the case of the liftgate battery box. So again, take a couple of minutes, make sure it's securely fastened. And if you notice, something else, no hold down. And so multiple things, still, we don't have time to fix it right, but we got time to work on it 3 or 4 times. This is the fuse cube that we utilized on our older systems. We went away from it simply because of lack of availability in the field for these. It went to a resettable circuit breaker. But one thing is, if you do have this, take a look at it. Make sure it is tight. Make sure the little caps on it are protecting the stud. Make sure whenever they put that together that the fuse cube is pointed the right direction so that you can see in there and inspect that element. Also, something else to notice here is, someone put a new lug on that. Judging by the crimp marks on it, it really wasn't the right type of crimper, and no heat shrink was utilized. These, typical fleets try to run a liftgate for 10 to 12 years, so we got to make sure all these things are as good and as sealed as possible to get as long a life of them as possible. And
Larry,
yes.
Sorry, you can mitigate a lot of issues just by putting a little heat shrink on that terminal and keeping corrosion out. Corrosion is a killer in our industry, and it's something as simple as a little heat shrink will go miles.
Yes, it will. And whether it's putting a new end on or doing a repair is one thing. And again, we're not really going to talk about today is the troubleshooting. Is test lights don't tell you anything. I still constantly see people trying to use a test light, and the trailer manufacturers, truck manufacturers, and even Purkeys, we spend lots of money, lots of time trying to make all these things as sealed as possible. All that is thrown out the window the first time someone stabs it with a test light or doesn't put heat shrink on it. All those things, the different chemicals used on the roads are going to find a way into all these things. So definitely an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So, time well spent to do all these things. And the last thing when we talk about, inspection is check the system. Again, we're going to go into this more the next 2 webinars we're hosting, but just because it looks good or, hasn't had any problems, still plug it in and test it. We were working on a fleet in California a few weeks ago that runs the Select system, which should have had the provision to work off the Stinger, the Reefer, and the 7-way. Well, one trailer we inspected, someone had butt connected the harness between the Select box and the dual pole box, so it wasn't even getting a good connection there. So it wasn't working off the Stinger. Looked at the 7-way, and it had a very poor connection inside the 7-way. That had been such a poor connection that it actually blackened from the amount of heat, but was not able to charge off the aux pin either. So long story short, they had a system that should have worked from 3 different inputs, was only working on 1, yet lights were on, they thought everything was good. So you really want to spend that few minutes and go through each of the different input sources and check it. That's why we made the double check product, is to be able to very easily, test all the different inputs from a known good source. When I say known good source, you can use your service truck or whatever, plug it in and make sure the system works well without a shadow of a doubt. So last, we're going to open it up to some questions, see if we have any here. I at least got a little indicator. Did have a comment from some freezing up on the video. Hopefully that should be addressed in the recorded version. So when you get the invite tomorrow, that should all be addressed, and you should be able to watch it uninterrupted with full video quality. There's a question for you, Thomas.
How often should this be done? At the very least, twice a year. But if you're only doing it twice a year, after the tough seasons, probably after fall and after spring, you'd be covering the 2 toughest parts right after they happen, and you can get any corrections made to the trailers. Anytime there's a PM, it doesn't take long to visually just look it over, but at the very least, at least twice a year.
All right. I had another question about, what is the double check that we mentioned? I don't want this to seem salesy at all. So the person that, asked that question, I will follow up directly and send you some information. But the 30,000-foot view or description of that is just a device we made to be able to plug in and provide a power source for all these systems. That way you can very easily and quickly check to make sure the system's working properly. I will send some information directly to that person that asked that question. Another one for you, Thomas.
So that do all battery boxes have hold downs? Every battery box comes with the provision for hold downs. It's imperative. I know the liftgate manufacturers wouldn't put it in there if it wasn't important. It's not just a piece of metal to throw out. They are important. Definitely hold those batteries down. Every one of them has it. If it doesn't have it in there, contact the liftgate OEM, and I'm sure they'd be happy to provide it if it didn't come with it. And they're probably readily available in the aftermarket as well.
I had someone ask about AGM batteries. Are they preferred to liftgates? Will you get better performance out of AGM batteries? Yes. But I'll also always make the comment too is a lot of fleets will make the change to AGM batteries, thinking, hey, if I put this better battery in, all my problems will go away. The thing you still have to keep in mind is it one, a good charging system, make sure, because you can put expensive batteries in if you don't have the right charging system. Now all you're going to have is more expensive dead batteries. So AGMs do have a lot of benefits, but I would say, one, you have to make sure the charging system is, adequate for whatever batteries you have. And the other thing, too, is you got to make sure your shop personnel are ready for AGM batteries, because they are different. They do require slightly different test equipment. So will I ever say across the board, yeah, put AGMs in everything? No. There are, several things you really want to look at before you try to just make a carte blanche decision to go to AGM batteries. And if you'd like, feel free to reach out to me and go into more detail on that. So the contact for parts and troubleshooting, I'll be more than happy to send that out. If anybody would like that, please put in a question or a comment that, we'll be more than happy to send out, contacts here. If you do need parts, need copies of the troubleshooting, which there is troubleshooting in the documents section of this webinar today that you can just click on and download right from here today. But if you need me to email them to you, I'd be more than happy to do that. Another question on carbon batteries. And before I answer that, I would like to talk to you directly and make sure I understand which batteries you're referring to. There is a lot of different chemistries out there, a lot of different, even just, lithium ions, the hot topic everybody wants to talk about right now. Someone told me the other day there's 300 or 400 different variations of even a lithium ion battery. So I'd like to talk to you that a little bit more detail before I try to answer that. Let's see, would recommend a deep cycle battery. Deep cycle is going to give you some better service life. You just have to make the decision on how much more is that battery costing you versus how much more it's going to give you. Honestly, our rule of thumb most of the time is, what you use for the truck is usually a good battery versus trying to stock two batteries. Again, somewhere around the 650 to 750 CCA battery with 180, 190 minutes reserve. Basically what we refer to as a dual purpose battery. It's going to give you enough reserve capacity and a good cycle life to live in that environment. But one of the biggest things you never do is high CCA batteries. We still get a lot of people think bigger's got to be better, and they want to buy high CCA batteries. And that's the worst thing you could ever put into a liftgate application. And someone asked where you can get one of the chargers. Again, I will follow up directly on that and make sure we're talking, find out for sure what you need and get you taken care of. And another one that's more of a direct question, so follow up on an onboard charger. Not working, not sure which one you mean. We may have to do some troubleshooting on that. Another question was on the black wire. I think it's in reference to the Deutsch connector going into the converter. I'm assuming that is the question. That was one that kind of references back to that 4-way Deutsch connector that goes into the actual converter. That is a good place to always make sure you're taking a good look when you do the inspection, preventive maintenance. That's those 4-way Deutsch connectors are a very well sealed, but you do have to be careful that water entry, if someone pressure washes them, bends those harnesses out of the way, you can let water into them. The other thing too is if somebody undid that 4-way connector, make sure that it's properly seated. I've seen several times where they're not pushed in all the way, don't lock in. It creates a lot of extra heat, and that will be your first place that you'll actually see some heat damage. But again, I will reach out to people for any more detail on any of these questions. But someone did ask, what makes high CCA batteries a bad choice? Some of the biggest things about high CCA batteries versus a lower CCA, in order for a battery to achieve higher CCAs, they have to make very thin plates to get a very high plate to electrolyte ratio. So you wind up with very thin plates in comparison, makes them much more prone to vibration damage. Plus, as those batteries cycle, those batteries or those thin plates in those high C batteries are going to make them much easier to shed material and just never going to get the same life out of them. There's actually a new SAE spec on those batteries where it's actually a cycle test. And a high CCA battery will never do anywhere near as many cycles as that lower CCA because it has much denser plates. So it's going to be able to handle those cycles a lot better. So there's several reasons why high CCA is not a good choice for liftgate or even trucks in most applications. Had a question, is there an indicator on the non-resettable fuse that tells you if it's bad? I'm assuming we're talking about the little 30-amp fuse cube that showed you one of the fuses that slides at the end. There is a clear window on the side where that element is, and 99% of the time you can very easily see that element will be burnt open, and usually it will be discolored inside, so it's pretty easy. One thing I will tell people, and we've covered this in some of the previous webinars, is you have to be very careful if you use a meter to check that fuse cube. A lot of times people want to use their meter and go to the stud on top. Well, that stud actually goes all the way through to the bracket, so you'll be reading battery voltage. You want to make sure you only use your meter and touch the actual ring terminal of that wire on the top. If not, you can get a very easy false reading thinking that fuse is good when in fact it is open and blown. And I think that's it. I do ask everybody to stay on here though, because we are going to have a quick survey at the end. So please stay on long enough to answer that, because we do value your input, and make sure that we are doing the right webinars and giving you the information we can to support you. Thomas, any closing words from you?
Just thank you for your time and attention, and as always, give us a call if you need anything. We're just a phone call away somewhere on the road. So
yes, thank you all very much, and look forward to seeing y'all hopefully next month on the next one.